Chapter 20. The history of Hyrcanus, the son of Simeon. Now Simeon, while he was yet alive, had appointed Jochanan, his son, to be captain. And having gathered to him very many troops, he sent him to vanquish a certain man who had come out against him, and was called Hyrcanus. Now he was a man of great fame, powerful in strength, and of ancient sovereignty, whom Jonathan encountered and defeated. Wherefore Simeon named his son Jochanan Hyrcanus, on account of his slaying Hyrcanus and gaining a victory over him. But when this Hyrcanus had heard that Ptolemy had killed his father, he was afraid of Ptolemy, and fled to Gaza. And Ptolemy pursued him with many followers. But the citizens of Gaza helped Hyrcanus, and shut the gates of their city, and hindered Ptolemy from reaching Hyrcanus. And Ptolemy returned, and departed to Dagon, having with him the mother of Hyrcanus and his two brothers. Now Dagon had at that time a strongly fortified castle. But Hyrcanus went to the holy house, and offered sacrifices, and succeeded his father. And he collected a large army, and went to attack Ptolemy. Wherefore Ptolemy shut the gate of Dagon upon himself and his company, and fortified himself therein. And Hyrcanus besieged it, and made an iron ram to batter the wall, and to open it. And the battle between them lasted long, and Hyrcanus prevailed against Ptolemy, and went up close to the castle, and almost took it. When Ptolemy therefore saw this, he commanded the mother of Hyrcanus and his two brothers to be brought out upon the wall, and to be tortured most severely, which was done to them. But Hyrcanus, seeing this, stood still, fearing that they would be put to death, desisted from fighting. To whom his mother called out and said, My son, do not be moved by love and filial pity toward me and your brethren in preference to your father, nor on account of our captivity be weakened in your desire of avenging him, but demand satisfaction for the rights of your father and mine, to the utmost of your power. But that which you fear for us from that tyrant, he will necessarily do to us at all events. Wherefore press forward your siege without any intermission. When therefore Hyrcanus had heard the words of his mother, he urged on the siege. Wherefore Ptolemy increased the tortures of his mother and his brothers, and sware that he would throw them headlong from the castle, as often as Hyrcanus came near to the wall. Therefore Hyrcanus feared, lest he should be the cause of their death, and he returned to his camp, still continuing the siege of Ptolemy. Now it happened that the Feast of Tabernacles was at hand. Wherefore Hyrcanus went into the city of the holy house, that he might be present at the feast and the solemnity and the sacrifices. And when Ptolemy knew that he had departed to the holy city and was detained there, he seized upon the mother of Hyrcanus and his brothers, and slew them, and he fled into a place whither Hyrcanus could not come. Chapter 21. The history of the going up of Antiochus to the city of the holy house to fight with Hyrcanus. Now when Antiochus had heard that Simeon was dead, he collected an army, and marched until he came to the city of the holy house. And he encamped around it, and besieged it, designing to take it by force. But he could not, by reason of the height and strength of the walls, and the multitude of warriors who were in it. But by God's will he was restrained from winning it, for he had betaken himself up to the north side of the city, and had built there 130 towers opposite to the wall, and had caused men to mount them, to fight with those who should endeavor to go up upon the walls of the city. He also appointed men to dig up the earth in a certain spot, till they came to the foundation of the wall, which finding to be of wood, they burned it with fire, and a very large portion of the wall fell down. And Hyrcanus' men opposed them, and prevented them from entering, keeping guard over the ruined portion. And Hyrcanus went out with the better part of his fighting men against the army of Antiochus, and defeated them with great slaughter. And Antiochus and his men were routed, whom Hyrcanus with his troops pursued, till they had driven them away from the city. Then, returning to the towers which Antiochus had built, they destroyed them, and abode in the city and around it. But Antiochus encamped in a certain place, which was distant from the city of the house of God about 2 furlongs. And at the approach of the Feast of Tabernacles, Hyrcanus sent ambassadors to him to treat for a truce until the solemnity should be passed, which he granted him, and sent victims and gold and silver to the house of God. And Hyrcanus commanded the priests to receive what Antiochus had sent, and they did so. Now when Hyrcanus and the priests saw the reverence of Antiochus toward the temple of God, he sent ambassadors to him to treat for peace, to which Antiochus agreed, and he went to Jerusalem, and Hyrcanus meeting him, they entered the city together. And Hyrcanus made a feast for Antiochus and his princes, and they did eat and drink together, and he made him a present of 300 talents of gold. And each of them agreed with his companion about peace and rendering assistance, and Antiochus departed into his own country. But it is related that Hyrcanus opened the treasury, which had been made by some kings to the son of David, to whom be peace. And he brought out thence a great sum of money, and left as much in it, consigning it to its former state of secrecy. Then he built up and repaired that part of the wall which had fallen down, and he provided carefully for the convenience and advantage of his flock, and behaved himself uprightly towards them. Now when Antiochus had come into his own country, he determined to go and fight with the king of Persia, for he had revolted from the time of the first Antiochus. And he sent ambassadors to Hyrcanus, that he should go to him, and Hyrcanus went with him, and departed into the country of Persia. And an army of the Persians met him, and fought with him, whom Antiochus putting to flight defeated and put to the sword. Then he stayed in the place where he was, and erected a wonderful building, that it might be a memorial of him in their country. And after some time he went forward to meet the king of the Persians, and Hyrcanus remained behind, by reason of the Sabbath, which Pentecost immediately followed. And the king of Persia and Antiochus met, and very great battles took place between them, in which Antiochus and many of his army were slain. And when news of this was brought to Hyrcanus, he marched into the country of Syria, and on his journey besieged Halippus, and the citizens surrendered to him, paying him tribute. And he departed from them, and returned into the holy city, and remained there for some days. Then he departed into the country of Samaria, and fought against Neapolis, but the citizens hindered him from entering into it. And he destroyed whatever buildings they had on Mount Jezebel, and the temple, which was done 200 years after that Sanballat the Samaritan had built it. And he slew the priests who were in Sebaste. And he marched into the country of Idumea, that is, the mountains Serah, and they surrendered to him, with whom he stipulated that they should be circumcised, and adopt the religion of Torah. And they agreed with him, and were circumcised, and became Jews, and were confirmed in this practice till the destruction of the second house. And Hyrcanus went on to all the surrounding nations, and they all submitted to him, and at the same time entered into an agreement of peace and obedience. He also sent ambassadors to the Romans, writing to them concerning the renewal of the league which was between them. When therefore his ambassadors had come to the Romans, they honored them, and appointed them a seat of dignity, gave attention to the embassy on account of which they had come, and dispatched their business, and replied to his letter. Chapter 22. The copy of the Romans' letter to Hyrcanus. From the elder and his 320 governors to Hyrcanus, the king of Judah, health. Your letter has even now reached us, on reading which we rejoiced, and we have questioned your ambassadors concerning the estate of your affairs. Also we have acknowledged their place of dignity in science, moral discipline, and the virtues, and we have honored them and made them sit in the presence of our elder, who has been careful to transact all their business, giving command that all the cities which Antiochus had taken away by force should be restored to you, and that every obstacle to the exercise of your religion should be removed, and that all should be made void which Antiochus had decreed against you. He has also commanded that all the cities which he had taken should continue faithful to you. He has likewise given orders by letter to all his provinces that your ambassadors should be treated with respect and honor. Moreover, he has sent with them an ambassador to you named Cyaneus, bearing a letter, to whom also he has entrusted an embassy, that he might entreat with you in person. Therefore, when this epistle of the Romans had reached Hyrcanus, he began to be styled king, being formerly called high priest, and thus the royal and sacerdotal dignities were united in him. And he was the first who was called king among the chief of the Jews in the time of the second house.